So would you say that it's worth trying to date a Korean woman at all? I mean, like if you're gonna have a relationship with her and her peers are might stand against you and she might stand against you, would you say that it's worth it at all? Like to try to have a relationship with a Korean
I mean,
woman?
obviously that's a very personal decision, but for me, I mean, it's been one of my continuous desires to come and live in Korea for a good 3 to 6 months and have a relationship with a Korean girl. That's really been one of my because I've met some really really wonderful girls, but my lifestyle makes it a bit difficult to provide them with sort of what it is that they're looking for.
What do you think they're looking for?
Right, and actually this is sort of interesting from a because I was in Malaysia, and it's kind of funny that I keep thinking of Malaysia, but I think it's actually a very apt comparison because it's also so strict. The difference is, as I was, is that in it's easy to think that Koreans are modern in terms of their social interaction, because when you come to Korea, it's a modern place. They've got hot clubs with laser lights and fog, and and all the people are dressed really nice, and they've got everyone's got a beautiful car, and they've got great infrastructure, subway system. I mean, anything that's modern, they have it. And so Westerners, I think, make the error continuously when dealing, and this is probably even more so among Americans, make the effort of showing up at a place and going, oh, they got pizza, oh, they got hot dogs, oh, they've got Mexican food, oh, they're just like us. And I think this is the error that leads guys really down the wrong path from the very beginning once they arrive here in Korea.
That's a big mistake. So if they want to reduce any frustration, they got to understand that no, Korea is a different world. Don't let what you see fool you. Mm-hmm. And it looks like Hong Kong perhaps, and it looks like Singapore in terms of like the infrastructure and in terms of like even you could argue the English to an extent. It's its own little world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I think that's the first problem that guys have is that they're thinking that this is just like back home, and then when they when something happens, they just feel like they just get smacked right upside the head, and they're quite thrown off by that, and I think and I guess that's sort of that whole sort of culture shock kind of thing, and I think that if you come here and you don't make too many assumptions about what it's like, then that is definitely a big help. But I think more than most every guy, I think, has a fairly has a more difficult time adjusting to Korea than to many other countries.
Interesting.
And so the reason I think Malaysia is a very interesting comparison is because Malaysia is Muslim, but the difference is that we know it's Muslim, and you see women walking around headscarves. So you're not it's much more difficult to make any errors about that this is a different place.
Right.
And so the important and so when I was in Malaysia, and the guy was asking me about value, right? Okay, because this is in essence one thing that I think is the most difficult thing about running game in different countries is that the definition of value changes. And so what you need to recalibrate more than anything is your attraction game. For those of you who aren't familiar with attraction game, generally when, if you want to, meet a girl, especially through cold approach, where you meet her on the street or at a cafe or someplace, but regardless, where you meet her, she has to like you. She has to be interested in you. She has to want to spend time with you. She has to think, wow, this is a really great guy. That part of the interaction where we focus on bringing out those qualities of ours that make us someone that she would want to be with, that is what we call attraction game. That's the attraction phase of the pickup. And so that's really and so I think that's really you need to really spend some time thinking about that when it comes to Korea. In the West, we tend to value very different things from what's valued here. We value things like risk taking. The idea that someone goes and lives overseas and leaves their country and lives overseas for a year because they're interested in the culture. Wow, that's really cool, right? That's the way Westerners tend to look at it. Wow, that's really great. That's amazing. You did that. I know when I've gone back to the States and people say, "Oh, where do you live?" And I say, "Oh, I live in Asia." And they're like, "Wow, oh my God!" And they would tell me all about it. And they're really interested in it. And it's not, and that's not, something that is nearly, they respect you because you went outside and did something that's outside of the norm. And that's sort of the essence of risk taking. And I would definitely say that is not something that's particularly perceived as being particularly desirable for Korean women. They don't go, "Wow, you're such an ambitious guy. You're so independent," and you go, that's not particularly interesting to them. It is true that they want to be with a guy that is fun, right? Because obviously the West also, people want to be with someone who's fun. It makes them laugh. That is important. However, they aren't. They don't generally. Of course, there it varies, right? But we're talking about. On the whole, they're not going to be with a guy just because he's, charming. They're not going to go, "Oh, this guy is so much fun, I'm going to hang out with him." In the West, that can be enough. It doesn't mean that she's going to, date you for 5 years and marry you. But that's the other point, because in the West, that's okay. She doesn't have to date you for 5 years. If she dates you for 3 months, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not the way it works here in Korea. In Korea, she's a ruined woman. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the fact is that many, I've heard many stories of guys who were scandalized by the fact that their girlfriend was not a virgin. I've heard stories of women, of a particular woman who she had revirginization surgery where her hymen was replaced surgically. I think 4 times, so that every time she had a boyfriend, he thinks he's the first. I think he probably must have figured out he wasn't fairly soon after. Yeah. But it's one of those things where he could have ashes and natural. Whoa. How did you? Oh, I just watched some videos on. I just wanted to make you happy. But it's the fact that a woman has to go and do that tells you, or feels compelled to go and do that, tells you a lot. Because it's not like once; it's 4 times.
So, what would you say would a Korean woman would find attractive in a guy? So, if humor is not enough to make her want to stay with you, what other things would a guy have to bring to the table for a Korean woman to go, "Hey, you know what? This guy is he brings value to me."
Well, the first thing is that, when Koreans are looking at relationships, they are, generally speaking, looking at long-term prospects. So, in the West, it's sort of like, okay, let's go and date, and, and if things end up working out long-term, then they work out long-term, and it's sort of haphazard. And there's not too many women who are out specifically with the express purpose of meeting a guy to marry. But in Korea, that's basically the only reason to date a guy. There's, if you're not going to marry him, why are you with him in the first place? Because you're not supposed to be, having casual sex. So if you're not supposed to be having casual sex, then, why would you, what would be the point of being with this guy? So that's the first thing that, they're looking at it from that perspective. They're always thinking, sort of long and into that, the long-term prospects of this guy. So that means that they put more emphasis on, job and schooling and family. And when I say family, I don't mean like, he loves his mom. When I say family, I mean, the status of his family. Where do they live? What kind of house do they have? What kind of car do they drive? What's the father's job? Things like that. Where did they go to school? All those sorts of things are way more significant. They have a much greater weight with her, with a Korean girl than those things have in the West. In the West, it's the reverse. If you're, in a lot